I'm Lesley Gibson. I'm a writer looking to find a vibrant, creative, diverse community to call home. Home is that basic need for shelter, safety and support, and it's what we all have in common, isn't it? But a sense of belonging may always remain elusive. In these first 6 podcasts, I'll be talking to Val McDermott, the award-winning crime writer, folk indie band The Tin Pigeons, and Keely Mills, the Chubby Mermaid, as well as poets, wandering minstrels, artists and sculptors from across the UK who will be deciding whether they're creative because of or despite their hometown. Where will I be tempted to lay down my hat, I wonder? Make me believe in all that I don't know. This week we focus on Peterborough. It's Stamford's nearest city, just a 20-minute drive away. And it's been an important place in my life, as my 3 children were born there. My eldest daughter went to school there, and it's where we catch the train to, well, anywhere. In fact, I wrote a play set on Platform 4, which is where I board the train to Edinburgh, and I've spent much of my working life there. If Port Talbot is a town of actors and St Ives is a town of artists, then Peterborough should be known as the City of Poets. In fact, they should be known collectively as a cathedral of poets, in homage to that fabulous landmark. Peterborough seems to produce poets like sparks from a Catherine wheel. Here we meet 3 of them. And first up this week is Keely Mills, whose heritage is a Romany one, and whose alter ego is the Chubby Mermaid. We had a fabulous, long and giggly chat at Stamford Arts Centre, but in this section we concentrated our thoughts on moving from to Peterborough, to Stamford, and on to being the compere for the vicar. Enjoy.
I'm poet in residence at Peterborough Lido. So I work for 2 different arts organisations, both part-time, which seems like it's both full-time. And then I'm also a poet as well on top of that. So I'm going to turn into a little bit of my dad. So I'm originally from a place called which is just outside of Peterborough. But I lived in Peterborough city centre for about 8 years and worked in Peterborough in the city centre, and I just felt like every single time I stepped out of my house, I was at work and I didn't have any separation between home and work. Since moving to Stamford, it's just really lovely. I have time on the bus or on the train to kind of get ready and meditate even and listen to podcasts and think about poetry ideas, which I never had that when I lived in Peterborough city centre. And also it was just too busy and too crazy for me then. And Stamford's a very different kind of place. It's very considerate. The town and the way it looks and the way it feels is what makes people want to live here. But not only that, it's what sells the town. Yeah. It's what makes people want to come here. So they don't want to come here and walk out of the town centre and there's loads of rubbish. No. They want to know that this town, this ideal, and I think everybody's very considerate. And I've found that. I live on a housing estate just outside of Stamford. And people really are, they're really considerate about the way their house looks, and it's like a giant village.
Georgian theme park, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really bizarre because there's part of you, like the really anarchic, quite chaotic Keely feels like, what am I doing here? The way I feel about the world, I think, what am I doing here? I've kind of moved into Middlemarch. But I think I said to you, I really like I'm not poor, but I like being a little bit of a poor artist in a rich town, which this is an overtly rich town, mainly because the charity shops are incredible. But I just quite like that. I think it kind of suits my character being here because I feel like I'm a little bit naughty and I'm a little bit more different here than I would be, say, I don't know though, because in Peterborough you can wear a quiff and everybody thinks you're bizarre, and so I don't know, it's a strange one, but it's taken me a little while, and also like it was bizarre because when I moved to Stamford everybody was like, oh, you're going to be really posh now and all this, like you think you're better than us, and it's like, what? No, I'm just moving to a quieter, nicer, not full of rubbish, considerate town. It's got nothing to do with being posh. That's just what I'm choosing to do right now, and the right house came up.
Well, I am interested in that because I know you did miss Peterborough a bit, don't you? The last
A little
time
bit.
I spoke to you,
Yeah, a
you
little
were
bit.
wondering whether or not it was the people of Peterborough were more of a home. Your friends, I mean, not generally.
Yeah.
Your friends and family.
Yeah, totally. I think that was the biggest wrench for me leaving. They were the reason why I moved back to Peterborough after being away for so long. Yes, but it's taken me about 1.5 years because I really fell out of love with Peterborough. I really didn't like it when I left. But it's kind of, at the moment, I'm a bit like, oh, my friends are great, and I would, and also I'm getting to that point in my life where I might want to buy a house. I don't know how.
Yeah.
And and you know, and I feel like the house that I really would like will be too expensive for me in Stamford, and that potentially is in Peterborough. So it's a purely economic thing. As well as, I know if I move back to Peterborough, all my mates are there and they're even more on hand. So
it is definitely located. When you start looking at houses, you really understand why location has the title location.
Yeah.
Because you do pay a premium for position.
Oh yeah, I mean, I just drove through. I got the bus through Castor. Now
Castor's lovely.
Yeah, and my friends that live in Castor call it Narnia, and I wrote a poem about it for them called Narnia, because it does feel like that. You kind of go through Castor and you feel like, there's a unicorn going to come out of the pub in a minute and fold me some origami. You know, it's just that kind of place, real chocolate box, and then a side of me thinks, or is it Midsummer Murders? Not really sure. But it's kind of, so I think you do pay a premium for the location. I'm often having a conversation with my husband about, wouldn't it be lovely, instead of these housing estates, we could just build like villages that look like Castor. Wouldn't people...
Kingscliff.
Yeah, Kingscliff. Yeah, you know, you think to yourself, would people be more considerate? Would they stop throwing rubbish around and being an idiot and shouting late at night? And would they be a bit more considerate of each other if the surroundings look less like concrete? Yeah. Don't know what. Yeah. Not sure.
Another thing that you said to me once before that's always stuck with me is that if you move, as long as you know who you are in the village.
Yeah.
You will be at home.
I'm not a character from the League of Gentlemen. No, it's just because of being... I think it's something, you know, brought up in a village called Eye, the left eye, not the right eye. The right eye's in Suffolk. Right, okay. And, and I think in my artwork, in my poetry, I actually really like to examine the idea of the real village, real communities that are around us, versus like the global village or this bigger village. Just part of my work, and one of the things I say is I take the village with me wherever I'm going. And I suppose that's kind of like when I go into residencies. So for instance, if I go into the Lido or on the bus, whoever, I can quickly figure out whose what role is in that village. Yeah. So I'd be like, oh, okay, so that's, I want to not say their names, but there's Sue. So she always buys the cards for everybody's birthday. Right. So she would be the midwife. Yeah. You know, in the village. That is Stan, and he always, like, you know, organises the lunches for the regulars. So, like, he's kind of, would be the mayor. Or you know, I kind of look at people and think, well, what would be your role in the village? Or, so you're the one that would grow tomatoes and barter them. Right, okay. You know, it's like really, like, basic, but that's how I kind of see people. And then I also see people that really don't have a role. I really don't feel like they have anything to give, even though they probably really want to. And also in a really big city or a really big place, like, how do you create that role? If it's like you and like 4 other people that you know, like, how do you create that community? How do you get that role? And I think a lot of our young people, I think a lot of our older people in between were too busy working, apparently. I don't think they know what their role is.
No. Do you know what your role is?
Obviously, you know, storyteller and talker of rubbish and poet. So, I'm very lucky that that's my kind of job role as such. You know, I'm the one who collects stories and then retells them and keeps them for like other people for the future. I think it's really good that you're researching this and asking people about it, because it's something that we often overlook and we take for granted. But actually it informs a lot of our decisions and everything that we are. A lot of the time why people do things is because they're just looking for a home, or they're just looking for an identity and safety. I think a lot of things would be solved. There's a fundamental thing at the core of it all. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting subject. And like, you know, I just hope whoever's listening doesn't think that I have this weird knapsack with all these village personas that I put masks on people.
I love that. I really hope that you do.
Well, I think we actually all have that village in us, or we all have that heritage in us that kind of like we take wherever we go.
Yeah, I mean, I really, it has really stuck with me. And if I'm being honest, it's because I wouldn't know who I was. Oh, yeah, I wouldn't know who I was in the village. I keep trying to work it out. Who am I? I don't really know. I'm sort of the one stuck out on the edge.
But there's nothing wrong with that. So would you be like the kind of the wild woman?
Would I be? Oh, I aspire to be wild.
Yeah, like would you have the cottage at the end of the village, like that with the amazing garden? Just go with me.
Yeah.
With the amazing garden. Yeah. Probably some objects in there that were brightly coloured of some description, maybe painted by someone by yourself, like nice smells, and that you'd just be getting on with your life, doing your thing. But like people would be wanting to know what's inside that house. They want to know what's going on and what you do. Yeah. I think, but what's wrong with that? I think that's a lovely role to have.
Yeah, except I find that role is one I have but don't really want. So I would
So what would you rather have?
I would say at the end of the village, just in case they didn't want me to be a part of it. So I could sort of be a bit of a part, but not really. And what I'd be yearning for is to be right in the middle, with a fluffy hat on that's got all sorts of straws and flowers poking out and going, look at me, here I am. But I would never have the confidence to do that. So I'd like stick out on the edge just in case they got fed up with me.
So, no, but that's really weird. So you want to be different, like you are different, but you're a bit nervous about being different. But why are you nervous about being different?
I don't know. If I knew that, I'd probably find a home to live in, wouldn't I?
Yeah, but it's like what I was saying. Like sometimes, you know, like I like being the naughty person. Yeah. I like, not always, because sometimes when I'm all hormonal and I think, oh God, that person's looking me up and down and judging me, and I know they are. I mean, like the other day, ironically, some kids shouted at me, she's a gypsy, and threatened to throw water on me. And I had a moment of, I don't know. I thought, I'll just go out of the Lido, mate, go for it. It's not going to make any difference. But, you know, it's like kind of, yeah, I think it's like embracing that role, because I always used to feel like a bit like, because I'm 5'9", really big curly hair, really big girl, always stood out, you know. I got a bloody Keely, for God's sake. You know, my mum could have called me Jane, couldn't she, or something? Well, that's my middle name. So I've always stuck out, and I always used to be quite frightened, just sticking out. I always used to wear black and blue. I used to look like a bruise, but honestly, I was like this mass of blackness walking past you. And it's only since, you know, in the last 10 years that I've really started to embrace the fact that, yeah, this is who I am. I'm going to stick out no matter what I do. This is it. I think within that village, you will find the people who feel exactly the same way as you.
I did find a while ago a word for me was odd, and people used to say, don't say that about yourself, but at the same time they weren't saying I was wrong. But actually I said, odd's all right, odd's okay, it's not the worst thing, is it?
I think it's a lovely word.
Yeah, I'm all right with odd. Weird maybe not, but odd. Yeah, well, that's all right.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that maybe your role in the village, I think you'd probably regret it, because everybody would be knocking on your door eventually saying, hey, Mrs. Odd, can you let me in? Because I'm odd too, but I'm just a bit frightened of people knowing about it.
Yeah, maybe. I like that. Now you've got me as a pied piper of odd people.
Well, not only in this imaginary village we've got going on. I'd be underneath a tree somewhere, probably. No, I wouldn't really. It makes me sound like I'm really wild, and I'm not. I like home comforts quite a bit, but
I think you'd still be quite at home in a full moon, wouldn't you? Really? Do you know, you could have a good naked dance under a full moon.
Oh, there's nothing better than swimming naked underneath a full moon. I'd be wherever the water is. But I think you're doing being odd, brightly dressed, whatever it is, being yourself. I think you're actually doing society a really good justice, a really good lesson. Gosh. Well, no, because if you think about it, because like if you're showing people something different and that it's okay to be the way they want to be, isn't that a lovely thing to be doing?
Yeah, actually, I'm agreeing with you because my past life was in mental health, and that is the thing, that people always want to change themselves, and that's where all the problems come, isn't it? You've got to be a one size, one colour, one hairstyle brigade of people, one personality even. Yeah. Well, of course we don't fit into that. Of course it's going to make you ill to try.
I know, and I think it's a real shame, because I think sometimes for people, the only place they feel they can really truly be themselves is at home. The moment they shut that door, isn't it?
It is, but what a pro you are to bring it round to that.
Oh, well, you know. Apparently, I told you, my other role in the village would be compare. I'd be compare for everything. Compare for the vicar, compare for the greengrocers. Just imagine that village. But then I'd go home, because I actually really don't like people. I just go home and but I'm actually quite shy, believe it or not. I'd go home and just be like, I don't want to talk to anyone, and I just don't want to see anyone, because that's a different Keely to them walks inside the door at home. They're very different people. Can you imagine if I was like this all the time with my husband? He would have divorced me by now. Yeah, so this village, do you think it will be by the sea then?
Well, I didn't until this morning. So now I'm thinking maybe, because that's where I was brought up, on the sea. Yeah. I was brought up by the sea. So, and I knew I missed it, but didn't really realise the extent.
I think the landscape you brought up in will have one or two effects. It will either make you want to run away and get away from it because it's stifling, or it isn't good for you, or at some stage it will make you want to go back to that kind of landscape.
That's right. I think the sea can never really be stifling, can it? It could be bloody cold, but
no,
it's never going to be stifling.
No, it's really the most beautiful, dangerous thing in the world, isn't it? The sea. Yeah. It's absolutely stunning, and it can just but it's absolutely nature at its most powerful.
Yeah.
So you're nowhere near to finding out where you're going to buy a house, or no?
I went round Kingscliff though. Yes. That's on the edge of the village, actually, as it happened.
I'm just saying. I'm just putting it out there.
But no, I decided against it in the end. It was no good for the dog. Oh, you could show. Wasn't that a delight? Keely's habit of taking a village with her is one that made such an impact on me that I am determined to develop a similar practice of my own. But for now, we're stopping off with Alison Hawtin. Alison's a poet and she's an art therapist. She's a single parent. She's recently moved towns, and her own background is of one that was full of foster children. She was a birth child in a house full of foster children. So I thought it would be useful to ask her what it was like to move to a new place with a family in tow.
I suppose really through my understanding of my Buddhist faith and Buddhist philosophy, that I really understand that actually, there is no right or wrong.
Oh gosh, that's such a relief.
Absolutely, isn't it a relief? And that, everything changed. It's all a person's perception, ultimately, and that perception changes as well. I mean, even the sense like, my brothers could listen to what we've said here and that their experience be completely different because their perception is completely different, of a shared reality but from different perspectives. And that, for me, is forgiving of the things that we do. We do the best that we can with what we've got, don't we? And putting all the bits in the pot, but ultimately, there comes a point where the experience of the other is their experience, and I can't take full responsibility for it, and I won't. So I put that caveat in there.
Important now, which is probably the point, isn't it?
Well, in a way, it's like, of course, as a parent, but also you're in there too, of course. Yeah. I think that, and again, this may be very, very influenced on one level my own background, because although we are from St Neots and we stayed as a family living in the same house for all of our childhoods, you know, so there was a stability in that respect. But obviously what went on in the house, there was a lot of movement.
Yeah.
But within a stability of mum and dad, you know, and the house and the, you know, very traditional kind of format in a way. But there was a lot of movement. And I'm just wondering, as I was listening to you there, just thinking how much of that is actually the framework that I work within. I don't know if it's going to make any sense. It's almost like there has to be enough stability. If you have enough stability, then loads of movement can happen around it.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we get a bit stuck with that and think that we have to keep things the same to create stability. And I don't think that's the case. You can be really stuck and actually lots of instability going on.
Yeah.
Or you can be really, really full of movement and feel very stable.
Well, this is interesting, because now what you're making me do is listen to my children. Not that I haven't listened to them before, but listen to them in a different way. So I can hear them saying now, just go. Just go. We're not here, or we might never come back, or we might not. Just go. And I'm thinking, oh, I can't, you know, it's not as easy as that. But why isn't it as easy as that? Yeah. And also the other thing that you were saying was the movement in the house. My eldest daughter, hello darling, talented and artistic herself, she will tell me that she felt, even though she stayed in the same house for her whole childhood, like a peripatetic child, because she moved bedrooms every couple of years. And she felt that was, you know, she'd rather have just been in the one and stayed there, basically. And then she said that when people ask her to look back on the house of her childhood, she's got about 5 different views of it, which would never have occurred. It would never have occurred to me. That's interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
But also, I mean, that's got to be person specific, hasn't it? Because you could have you may have another child, I don't know, but you also could definitely have another person who that movement of rooms wouldn't matter so much.
Yeah.
Their thing would be the house, for example, and the rooms are irrelevant. And then, but for your daughter, the change of rooms are relevant. And then you can have another person who the change of moved furniture in the room is distressing or something they remember, you know. So it and again, that's why I go back to in the beginning when I said, you know, do we in the end just rationalise decisions we've made to make ourselves feel okay with the decisions we've made? I think to some degree we do, because in the end, you know, I've made decisions for my family that have involved moving and you know, selling, moving on from childhood homes and stuff like as an adult myself, which my parents didn't do.
Yeah.
With the bricks and mortar, I mean, and the space that we lived in. The physical place is important, you know, to know that exists, if you like. And I can go back to St Neots, and on one level I've got some really, I know it very well, and on another level I don't know it at all anymore because it's changed.
It's not your town anymore,
exactly,
is it?
you know. And I think that's the truth of everything. It's that illusion we get caught up in, isn't it? That by keeping certain things the same, we're somehow keeping hold of something that doesn't exist anymore.
No, and my friends often tell me, because I imagine, you see, because when I go back I have a lovely time and a lovely night out with them, and I imagine they're doing that every night of the week, if not during work days. And they say, no, we haven't done this since the last time you were home.
Yeah.
And it is funny, the pictures that you put in your mind. I am interested that people will move away from the place that they were born and live and have those strong connections, and yet not live there, and they're still lauded by the people that live there as, you know, one of their own, but actually one of their own is no longer there.
It's where we're birthed. I mean, for me, I think if you just use the analogy of, you know, the birth mother, as in, again, you know, having all those links with an original family who, you know, we did have a birth mother and I was a birth child in that respect, but we had a lot of other people who came to us that were children of people, you know, but their birth mothers, if you like, you know, were somewhere else, and different things had happened. And of course what was difficult about that is a lot of them, you know, not nice things had happened to mean that they'd been taken away from or left their birth mother. And, you know, I think that element, because I'm sure there are people who, you know, their hometown may want to
disown them,
or the other way around. They want to own them, and they don't want anything to do with it anymore. You know, and that it's like a direct parallel, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
now you're making me think of towns as mothers.
Yeah,
so
you know, because it is, isn't it? Those famous
sense.
people are owned by, you know, all they had to have done really is be born there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're ours, and they get the plaque up on them.
Yeah, I mean, and I feel the same. I will go around telling everybody of all the famous people that have been born in Kirkcaldy, because I am very proud. But on the other hand, I think it's only an accident of birth, isn't it? People are proud of something they had absolutely no choice in whatsoever. So we could just let that go. That would be useful.
Well, I think the thing for me is that it creates separation. More than there's, you know, what's the pride? It's behind what's behind the pride of, you know, I belong here, if you like. It's like, I think there's a general sense that pride is a good feeling, but actually, you know, subtler underneath pride will generally mean then that I'm making a discrimination here of something that's good and something that's not so good. Exactly. And either it's a bit like the Cambridge Peterborough thing, you know, the amount of people that say, oh, I used to live in Cambridge, you know, it didn't say Cambridge itself, and they go, ooh, you know, really quite disdainful of like, well, why would you move from Cambridge to Peterborough? You know, it's just like, it's implicit in there that that's a bad thing to do, and why would you do that? And then, you know, I've met a few people who have had that. A guy relatively recently had moved from Ely to Peterborough, and he had exactly the same, and they're like, why would you do that? And I think, you know, that whole thing, and that was one of the things I do feel in Peterborough, that's part of the kind of Peterborough psyche, is that's a bit internalised. And so a lot of people themselves are saying, but Peterborough's rubbish, why would you do that?
Yeah. And actually, maybe it's because it's a new town. Because I went to see a play that was at the Quay. It told you the whole history of how Peterborough came about, why it came about, the work involved in it, and the philosophy behind it. And I came out so proud afterwards. I was so proud. Oh. So it completely changed my view of the place. Completely.
Because I feel there's that about Stamford, isn't there? Stamford's seen as a nicer place than Peterborough, you know, nicer in inverted commas. And I think, again, for me, it's like with everything, you know, and this is very fundamental Buddhist view, but I do believe it is like something I've continued to try and work with and practice over the years, is that it's all about view. You know, if I choose to view Peterborough as rubbish, it'll be rubbish. And if I choose to view it as not rubbish, it will be not rubbish. And, you know, and the same about people and about... It's not naive. It's because, you know, it doesn't mean that you're going to be walked all over or you can't see the wood for the trees. It just means actually just go into it with that view.
I think it means entirely the opposite. And I think it means actually what you're doing is looking for the positive. And this gratitude thing, I know that Buddhists think about that a lot. Feeling gratitude actually helps you. You know, it's not the other person really, it's helping, because you can't do anything about them. It helps you.
And we know that. I mean, just, you know, you can have a bad day, can't you? And you go out with that particular head on, really, that's, you know, thinking the world's all a bit against me or whatever. And you know, that's pretty much a lot of what will get mirrored back to me. You know, but I know, again, you know, and I enjoy kind of playing with that in a way. And like you say, the big thing that constantly changes things is like view it from another perspective, which is where it brings me back to kind of one of the key things that I love as an art therapist and love as a person, I suppose, is looking at that, constantly looking for the alternative perspective and looking at, you know, that there's always a multitude of views on something or whatever. You know, and some people who know me know I'm pretty opinionated, so they'll be laughing about this, thinking, you know, what you with accepting loads of views. But it doesn't mean I don't know that they're not there. But, you know, I've got my view. And again, I'm working on that in terms of just letting it flow more, it flow more. And so, and I think within that flow, then all of these things that have become or have the potential to be very crystallised, like where is home, for example. You know, the bricks and mortar, whatever, starts to let the edges flow of all of that, doesn't it? And it's actually, it's not, maybe it's not the bricks and mortar. Well, if it's not the bricks and mortar, what is it? What's home? Well, for me, ultimately, it's a concept, isn't it? And like coming back to when you said about my, you know, your unsureness about changing home for your children and all of that. And I know this from my own side is like, it's great to have the bricks and mortar to go to because that's practically makes things easy. But ultimately, when I really needed a sense of home, it was the people that I needed, that I saw. And I think that's the same with our children and, you know, our family. It's like if I'm seeking a sense of family or whatever, then, you know, I don't really care where they are. Yeah. You know, and especially now with technology, you know, you can bridge all of that so much easier anyway. It's like, I want to connect with you. Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. I completely get
that.
And I think that's the same with children, you know. It's like your children saying to you, just go. Yeah. Because ultimately, if they need you, they need you. Yeah. They don't need, you know, the bedroom that still it's got the same wallpaper on it from when they were 13. Yeah. Might be nice and reassuring and all of that. That's lovely. It's a lovely bonus for, you know, for people who do have that. That's amazing that they can go home and get that lovely kind of womb-like nurture of like, this is my room. Yeah. But for me, I think, you know, if that stops other people, again, speaking from my moving on, then it's lost its purpose.
Yes. I'm really enjoying hearing you say all this because I've already spent their bedroom, basically.
Have you?
But also, as you talk, I've got a really strong vision of the sea, and I'm just wondering why. I mean, I grew up on the sea.
Oh, did you?
So, and I've chosen here where we are.
There's not much sea.
We can't get much further from the sea. But I'm just interested from my own point of view. I don't have an answer to it. Why, as I'm listening to you speak, it makes me want to cry.
Oh,
it really does. Oh, how interesting.
Yeah.
How interesting. I'm going to have to go and think about that now.
But what element of it has made you want to cry? The sea? The picture of the sea coming to your mind?
It is the picture of the sea. It's the noise, and it's how I feel when I'm next to the sea.
When you're near the sea.
Yeah.
Wow.
Sorry, just wiping a tear away. Great radio.
Ever the therapist, look. This is all, yeah. If you like what you hear, you can come and see me.
And you didn't even have to do any art. I didn't even get a costume brush there.
No, exactly.
Right, okay. I'm trying to go with the flow when I feel things during this whole series of podcasts.
Okay.
Because it's supposed to be my journey and where it intersects with other people's. That's great. So I am trying to actually vocalise what happens as I go along, and that's completely taken me by surprise. So,
well, you keep vocalising then.
Thanks very much.
Well, thank you, Lesley, for inviting me. Honestly, let me add this. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this. It's really got me thinking about various things, and it was lovely actually to be able to think about others in my past, and you know what I mean, and the connections that can be really very fragile but strong. Yeah. You know, some are really in your face, some aren't, and all the rest of it, but how much they matter, and all the people and connections in my life that matter, they all mattered.
Yeah, they do.
They all mattered. Yeah.
Great. So we're at our last stop, and it's to Becky Owen Fisher. I like to think she's a bit of an arts polymath, and she's someone I admire for her energy and her many talents. She completes her trio of spoken word poets, but she's also a performer, director, producer, stage manager and playwright. I may have forgotten one or two. She lives with her partner Tom Fox, who runs Lamphouse Theatre.
There's been a sort of revolution in Peterborough, I reckon, in the last about decade or so. I left here in 2005, and I came back in about 2009. And when I left, there was nothing happening here. It was, we were described by the Arts Council, I think, as a cultural desert or a black hole. We were definitely a dark area for arts. There was nothing happening at all. And I couldn't wait to leave. And I came back out of financial necessity in 2009 when London just became insanely expensive. And something was happening. There was something going on. There were little bits and pieces springing up. And then in about 6 or 7 years ago, I discovered Metal. They just came to the city and they were doing their big lantern parade, which was their kind of opening event, and I got involved in that, and it was just, things were getting really exciting. Stuff was beginning to happen, and I think poetry is one of those things that you can do very well on your own. So I don't know whether it's got something to do with the fact that at the time it was quite hard to find pockets of people that were creating, and there wasn't much theatre happening. There was a little bit, but actually poetry is something that you can go away and you can write, and then you can write it on your own, and then you can share it. And slowly sharing nights started to appear where people would come together and then write in groups, and now there's all sorts of conglomerates and sort of meetings and meetups and places that you can read things. But I think it's a really lovely community that is slowly growing into the city, and I think there's still work to be done to get us to a place where we are known by people who are not within that community, if that makes sense. So you hear a lot of, oh, nothing ever happens in Peterborough, nothing goes on in Peterborough, and I find that bizarre, because I look at my Facebook events list and I look at my email invites list, and I think, I'm doing something every night this week. How can people say there's nothing going on in Peterborough? But then I suppose when you look at it, you think, that's because these are all people that I know who are inviting me to things. And I think there's still work to be done to get word out outside of that community, if that makes sense. I'm just thinking about a company called Knee High, a theatre company called Knee High, who had a base in Cornwall. They started in Cornwall, they're from Cornwall, and then they now tour nationally. They've been going for 25, 30 years, but they still maintain a base in Cornwall to this day. And it's really, really important then that they make their work there, and that they have a theatre there and a rehearsal space there that they use, but that they tour nationally as well. But they call Cornwall their home. And I think Lamphouse, I would love to think that we could be like that. I'd love to think we could tour nationally one day, but I'd love to think that when we're touring nationally, not if, that we will always maintain a base in Peterborough, because we're really proudly based here, and it feels like we're doing good stuff at the moment, and we're really getting somewhere, and I wouldn't want to abandon the city. But yeah.
The Way Home Project is written and presented by me, Lesley Gibson. The editor was Claire Crofton. Music and project artwork by the Tin Pigeons. Get off now and plug to the pod website for more insights, comments and transcripts, along with photos and bits of other fluff and stuff. Remember to describe and subscribe, and invite your friends along so you can talk about me afterwards. More next week.